Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I'm your host, David Streggy, and right now I'm going to continue my Les Miserables film adaptation productions reviews. And this adaptation comes from 1998 from a director from Denmark uh, by the name of Billie August. And it stars relatively decent cast, where we have uh, Liam Neeson playing Jean Valjean, Jeffrey Rush playing Inspector Javert, uh, and we have Uma Thurman playing a character, as well as several other relatively well-known characters. And this follows the story of a man who was in prison for stealing a loaf of bread, so to speak. Like I said before, he's basically in prison for 19 years, not only for just stealing a loaf of bread, but for trying to escape. And except normally it starts out a little bit differently. Here, it starts out a quarter of the way through, where we see that Liam Neeson's character, Jean Valjean, he's relatively rocky and craggy looking. He looks like he's starving, so he shows up on the doorstep of a priest who ultimately he steals his silver from him, but once he gets caught, the priest is like, "Hey, well, you you forgot to take these too." So he basically buys his soul from him, and he is ever dogged by the Inspector Javert, which is played by Jeffrey Rush, who plays him to a T, I think. And the thing about this film is this film actually was a little bit more violent to me, because not only does he hit the priest, but he also rams Javert up against the wall and bloodies him a little bit. So it was definitely intriguing to watch this adaptation. For in this adaptation, there's a little bit longer of how long Cosette's mother is alive, who is played by Uma Thurman. So they actually have several days together. Marius is played by Hans Matheson, who he's kind of an emo-ish, pretty-looking guy. One of the things that I found different is that he actually gets to meet with Cosette out in the courtyard, where, as in the previous adaptation, he was only able to meet and greet with her at the gate, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, he is told to be an honest man, so he becomes one. In this adaptation, he becomes a mayor, or he is also known as another name with an M word. But there are some heights that I think that they were able to go to in this film, like in order to get into the courtyard of the church when Valjean was to escape Javert's notice with Cosette, he had to scale the wall of a city, which in two other adaptations that I watched, it was actually scaling the height of a wall that was around the church, not around the city. Um, there was another thing that was different where um, the reason why um, Javert infiltrated uh, the barricade. He actually was going after Jean Valjean, but he ran into Cosette and he threatened her life. So that was a little different. So there were various differences in this film that I found that were relatively more violent and more, more in your face that um, some of the previous adaptations had not had. But there was always a generous amount of strength that you could see in the character of Jean Valjean when he lifted the cart from a man. Um, and you didn't have many flashbacks of when he was in prison. All you got of the experiences of his time in prison. So that entirety of being in prison was only in flashbacks that the prisoner that Jean Valjean had. Now, this does follow the storyline for the most part, but in this adaptation, just like in the musical adaptation of the film, the ending, the where, the ending was actually somewhat different too. Technically, Javert goes off and kills himself because he's got nothing left else to do in his life. His whole hunt of Valjean had consumed him, but when he realized he was actually a good man, he realized the wrong of his doings. So, but in this adaptation, he took Valjean's place and jumped into a river that uh, on a normal given basis, you can't die from jumping from just falling into this river. It kind of looked like the rhyme in a little bit, but there there were some very humane moments in this film, and Javert when he had found out that Cosette was actually seeing this young man, he actually wanted to go and talk to her father. So him actually coming to the home and speaking with Cosette, that was a little different as well. So ultimately, Claire Dane was the young woman who was playing Cosette, not as a child, but um, she. I remember her playing in Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, and seeing her as this character. Oh, she also didn't know uh, the truth of the matter of Valjean until the very end, but she was actually told by Jean Valjean the story before the end got there. So that was a little different as well. So ultimately, when I first saw this, I didn't like the film because I was so used to the musical adaptation. But once I once I saw it again just recently, I had more respect for it. So just noticing these differences. Plus, there's the time differences during the years. So ultimately, if you enjoy this kind of film and enjoying watching different variations and adaptations of this character and storyline, I would definitely suggest this as being a film for you to find and watch. So hopefully you've enjoyed my view of this film, and like and subscribe to the page. And I will definitely have other reviews out there to do of different variations. So stay tuned for more Les Miserables reviews. And tonight we're talking about Peter Benchley's The Beast. In any case, have fun listening. Have a good evening.